Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Justin Davis from Drone Camps and welcome to the bench. I have the Lumenier. This is the QAV ULX and I didn't see a lot of information out there on this one, so I wanted to do sort of an overview and a little bit of a how-to. Not a full build video, but I wanted to give you some tips on building yours because, like I said, there's some other videos out there and those are good, but I wanted to do my own version of this for you. And I also wanted to show you some components that I recommend for the builds, as always with the Lumenier stuff. This kit is special to me because I am really big into shaving weight off of my frames and figuring out how to make the lightest weight scenario for my power system, because what happens is you get a ton of punch out and you get a really nice, fast, efficient performing quadcopter if you can do that. Power to weight ratio is very critical for weight. Also in having things centered out as well, as good as possible. So CG is very important, and shaving off weight. So without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about some of the components that we have laying here. Nicest thing about this frame is that it is an ultralight frame. 45 grams is what this frame weighs, and that's pretty amazing. I will give you a total final weight once we get all the components on here. And for my build, I'm starting out with the Lumenier Skitzo. These are 2205 motors, and these are the latest and greatest updated ones. These are 2205Cs. So Skitzo, you get that purple drink. You want to drink this because these are super awesome. The other awesome thing about these is that they have ceramic bearings. And when I used to fly single rotor helis, this is what everybody wanted, was ceramic bearings, because ultra lightweight and super tough. Now you get some extra arms in the case, which is really cool. You get a Lumenier strap. You get titanium hardware with ULX. So they asked me if you know, I like to have steel, but I waited around an extra 2 weeks to do this video because I waited for the titanium to show you some of the titanium hardware. If you look at some of the other hardware out there, it's going to be steel. Like this is a little steel, and you can see this is kind of, it's a different color. It's a little lighter. So that's how you can tell it's titanium. Very, very lightweight, and once you add all this steel on there, it does add a lot of weight. So by going titanium, that's kind of a new trend that's happening right now. This is the way to go because it's going to lighten up the frame a ton. So I have all my screws set in different piles here according to length, and I'm going to use the Lux flight controller on here, and I'm going to use all-in-one, a 4-in-1 Lumenier 20 amp ESC, and these are little BL Heli ESCs. So what I'm going to do is I took all the wires off the side of the ESC. When you get this, go ahead and do that. And I'm going to show you this up close and show you how it hooks up to the flight controller. It's actually pretty simple, but you have all your solder tabs here for the motors that are going to come up. You have 3 wires on each motor, and you'll do those according to where it is numbered on the board. So on this ESC board, I'll show you close up later, it's numbered 1 through 4. Now it doesn't correspond correctly in clean flight, but what we're going to do is when we run the signal wire up to the flight controller, and this is your signal wires coming up from and they're going to be colored. What we're going to do is we're going to look at the list here of which motor is which, and then we're going to put the signal wire for this motor in number 1, the next one over for number 2, 3, and 4, and so on. So that's how that's going to work, and I'll show you that a little bit later. Now the rest of the parts I have here, I have a Lumenier Raceband. This is 200 milliwatt, pretty standard for most people, 200 on Raceband, so you can do your races. We have some, this is aluminum hardware. This is sort of a hardcore anodized aluminum. These are your standoffs that are going to come off the top of your stack, and this is where your camera is going to go in between. So this is your about as much space you have for your camera, and you get some Lumenier stickers along with it as always. And these other parts here, they look kind of like arms, but these are the reinforcement arms that are going to go on the outside edges around the frame. And when you set yours up, so to give you some quick setup tips on the first part of your build, when you first set it up, you want to start with one arm, and you want to grab these plates, and this is an example of this plate. So this is an extra thick X in the middle of this plate. These plates are your bottom plate, very bottom plate, and the next plate up, and that's what's going to sandwich these arms inside here. So go ahead and take your longer, your medium sized screws, the ones that are going to run about halfway up these little black tabs we have here. They're going to go just above. I'll take this off so you can see. So these little black tabs are going to face out, and you're going to come up with your extra post here. I'll take this off so you can see. So once you have these facing up, you have a little bit of extra room here to run these posts all the way down and tighten those all the way up. And you want to use Loctite on all of these connections that are metal to metal. So make sure to use some Loctite on these screws. Coat those up nice so you don't have any screws vibrating loose. But I'll show you the way that this arm layout goes now that you can see the way that goes, because I was a little confused about how some of this went on at first. So I'm going to try to run my wires up and under and have them coming out to the side there. Get this back on here. So I left my label on here so I could sort of see which direction things are labeled. Also, and give me a reminder about which way these have to come out. These wires have to come out and which one they are. So go ahead and leave your sticker on there for now. But with this very back motor, you can see, I'll show you from the bottom. So this is your left motor over here, and your arms are going to face this way. So I'll get this in the frame there for you so you can see that this one's facing down, this arm comes down, faces down, this one comes over, faces over to the left, this top arm faces up, and this one faces to the right. So, and then I'll give you a top view of that, and I'll just pause for a moment so you can kind of see. I really should take this motor off so you can see how your layout's going to go. But that's the way you want to have it, because when you run these outer arms on there, you're going to want to use the extra long screws to go up through about 8mm worth of carbon there to get to the motor. So these are 4mm arms. But that's about it for now, guys. I'm going to continue this build as I get a little further along. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and finish soldering out my ESCs to the 4-in-1 ESC here, and try to neatly tuck my wires in underneath there. I highly recommend the 4-in-1 ESC because that way you have a cleaner build and you have less wind resistance on this frame. You don't want ESCs hanging out here on these arms because they don't make them thin enough to not stick out on those arms. So go 4-in-1 on this, guys, and you'll be a lot happier with the way this looks and the way it flies when you're done. So okay, guys, we're all finished up and we've soldered the motor wire 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 along the board on the outside of the edges of this 4-in-1 ESC, and these three come out, and I wrapped them, tucked them underneath, and I came out around the side here just to make it a little neater instead of coming straight out from the outside. Kind of having too much stuff hanging out here would be kind of a better setup for me. So what we're going to do next is, after we have that done, we have to use this little cable harness that came along with the 4-in-1 ESC. Go ahead and grab that out of the package. That's going to be the longer set of wires instead of that shorter one that comes along with it. Don't use the shorter one because that's not going to reach your Lux flight controller. We're going to use this one, and we're going to snip off those little end pieces, look like little servo connectors, because we're going to do a direct solder right onto the Flux flight controller, and I'm going to show you that a little closer up a little later. Now this is labeled here, and you'll notice right away I want my battery leads in the back, and if I set this up the way they have it labeled here, my battery label cords would be in the front, and that's not going to work for me, so it's not going to work for you either. So all the way they have these motors labeled here would be wrong. So we have motor 4 back here where motor 1 is going to be. So I'm going to sort of explain this to you. The way this is going to work is you're going to have this harness. It's going to be coming out of this port right underneath here, and each of these are labeled on here. Now this says motor 1 up here, so if this says motor 1, we look right here on this 4-in-1 ESC and we look for where it says motor 1, and what we're going to do is, we know in clean flight or in beta flight that this is actually, this arm up here is motor 4. So motor 1 signal wire is going to go into motor 4 on the flight controller. So look for the number on your LUX here, number 4, and that's where you're going to run that first signal wire coming off this harness. So each of these are labeled here on the sticker. It says ground, 5 volt, M1, M2, M3, M4. Now that's on here, you'll see the black wire here. That's the ground wire. The next one up is the signal wire, or excuse me, the next one up is the 5 volt wire. That's going to power your LUX flight controller. So run that one to the input on your flight controller. And then these other 4 cables here are your signal wires. Now they're also, when they come out the side here, they are labeled. The white one's going to be motor 1, which is this one up here. Like I said, this one's actually going to be motor 4. So, and then so on. So corresponding to your clean flight or your beta flight layout, you want to make sure that these signal wires go to the correct port tab on your flight controller. Very important, because otherwise your motors aren't going to work correctly according to beta flight and clean flight. So like I said, 1 will go to number 4. Let's see if I can get this right. Number 2, motor 2, where they have it labeled is this one. So that would actually be motor 3, and motor 3 up here, this one would be 2 on the flight controller, and then this last one here says motor 4, and they have it labeled here as motor 4. So this one's actually going to the number 1 spot on your flight controller. So that about explains how to set up this 4-in-1 ESC. Now I'm looking at the bottom of the LUX flight controller, and you see where it says G and BAT. That's where we're going to bring these 2 wires up to power the flight controller. So now I'm going to go ahead and solder those on to the flight controller so we get power. Now go ahead and take your ground wire. I always like to do that one first, and come in from this side over here. Probably have my smaller tip on here, but I'm going to make this work. You don't want any solder to bridge these 2 tabs. So go ahead and hook up my red wire to the battery side. Make sure you get that nice and hot so it's not a cold solder. Okay, there we go. Alright, so now we'll have power to the LUX. So now I'm to the point where I'm going to go ahead and put these posts on for a semi-permanent. And I'm going to go ahead and take some Loctite and put it on there nice and liberally. And go ahead and wipe that off a little bit. Because whenever you have metal to metal, you definitely want to use Loctite so these things don't come undone. And we'll do this one at a time. So now that I have Loctite on those posts, I can go ahead and put my plastic little black standoffs here, and then the flight controller is going to go on top of that. So go ahead and take your 4 plastic standoffs and put those on each post, and then go ahead and sit your flight controller on top of that. You want to make sure the arrow faces forward on your setup. Kind of tricky to go and put it on there. Don't force it down, just kind of shimmy it down on top of the posts. Okay, so now I'm ready to go ahead and solder up my motor signal wires coming off the bottom of the 401, and we want to look at this setup here. We want to look at the way they have these. Now this one says motor 4 back here, but we know it's actually motor 1. So we're going to take that brown wire that says M4 and we're going to solder it to where the flight controller says 1, because we want that one to be motor 1. Now before I go ahead and mount this flight controller, you want to go ahead and bridge where these 2 tabs are for 5 volt, and this is going to give you 5 volt where your receiver is going to solder on the top of the board on this side. So your RX, 5 volt, and ground are going to go here, but otherwise this is going to be 3 volt here, and it will not power your receiver if you're using something like an X4R. So I'm going to try to explain this to you as simple as possible for this signal wire inputs here on the flight controller. and you want to pay very close attention to this part. So the way they have it labeled is wrong in clean flight and beta flight. So we want motor number 4, how they have labeled here, you want that to be number 1. So this is going to be your number 1 motor, number 2, number 3, and number 4 up here on this arm. So the way you're going to do that is take the brown wire and go to number 1, because originally that would be number 4, but we're going to make that number 1. So this will work right in clean flight if you do it this way. Now the next motor up, they say is motor 3, but it's actually motor 2, so we're going to have the blue wire here. And you can look on this little correspondence here on the bottom of this to kind of see what wire is what on your harness. Now we have brown on number 1, blue on number 2 for motor number 2, and then down on number 3 motor, which originally they had labeled motor 2, they say here, but we want this to be motor 3. So we're going to take that motor 2 yellow wire and put that on the 3. Now we're going to go up to motor 4, and that one originally said motor 1 on the schematic here, but we're going to use the white wire here on motor 4 to make that motor 4, because the white wire corresponds to the ESC for motor 1. Now try to make it as simple as possible. Hopefully this little information here helped you out in your layout. So brown wire number 1, blue number 2, yellow number 3, and white number 4. Pretty simple. Okay, so now that we have that done, now I can start putting my receiver wires on here. They're going to go on this side up here where it says RX 5 volt and ground, and I depinned this X4R that I have here, and I'm going to run the wires and go ahead and snip this off and snip this end off. And I'm not sure how long I want it yet because I haven't made the top of the stack yet, but I might end up kind of moving it or cutting these a little bit shorter depending on how this all works out as the build goes along. So the next step will be to go ahead and put those signal wire 5 volt and ground on here and connect it to the board. Okay guys, now that we have everything taken care of with the signal wires coming from the motors, and we have each motor set up on the flight controller, now what I'm going to do is, I was telling you I was going to solder up my receiver over here, and this is my receiver wire coming in right here, and I just twisted them up just to keep them a little neater once this build is set up. But this yellow one's going to be the RX signal, and then the red is going to be 5 volt, and the black is going to be ground here. So hopefully you can see that. And that's the way you set up your receiver, and you want to make sure that you bridge the 5 volt 2 plates on the back underside of this. Look at the Lux manual, and if you don't do that, you're not going to get power to your receiver at 5 volt. You're going to get 3 volt. So make sure you bridge those plates underneath here so you indeed power your receiver. Okay, now the next thing I have going here is I have my power cable going over to the 5 volt connector here, ground and 5 volt there, powering my camera. And now I have my video signal wire going to my camera from my VTX. I have it spliced here. And I tried to make the cables a little shorter here. I'm also probably going to shorten up this cable a little bit because what I'm going to try to do, if at all possible, I'm going to try to put my receiver above the flight controller. That way I have it inside, and then I can run my antennas up and out the back. That way that my receiver's protected during any crashes. Now I don't like to have things on the outside of the frame because crashes are really hard on electronic components. Now the only thing that's going to be on the outside of this stack will be the VTX, and I'm going to mount that on the very back, so hopefully that avoids some damage. But if you're flying around trees and doing gaps and things, so anything can happen. Now I wanted to show you this camera setup real quick. At this point in your build, you can go ahead and you can start putting these steel posts, these standoffs, or these aluminum ones, on the posts, and use a little Loctite when you screw these down. You're going to screw those down by hand. And once you do that, you can grab your top plate. This is the very top plate of the whole build. So you're going to use I use M2 bolts here with nuts on the bottom, and this camera mount right out of the Runcam box from my Runcam Swift fits perfectly on the top of this plate, and those bolts go through there. The nuts are on the underside. and I used little tiny ones, probably, I believe those are 4 millimeter long. If you don't have them laying around, you can always take a Dremel tool and usually Dremel this off. If you do it the opposite way and they're coming up the top, you can just Dremel the top of that off and have your nut on the top. But I had short ones, so I did it this way, and it makes it nice and neat. Now the camera will fit right up inside there and have enough tilt once I get the rest of my posts on. Now I'm sorry I didn't mention this earlier, but you really should put something in between your PDB and your ESCs down there and your flight controller. If you have some sort of a piece of plastic or something you can put in between it to kind of separate those two boards. That way, if you have any possible shorts, you will maybe safeguard that a little bit with something in between. But I cut this one sort of so you can see. It's kind of hard to see here, but I cut each corner off and it fits nicely over underneath the flight controller. So go ahead and do that. If you've got to this point of the build, maybe take it back off and put this down. And this is some of the anti-static plastic that I used from another component that came along with it. So now we're pretty much to the point where we can start building the camera and the side plates that go on here. Now the cool thing about this kit is they actually include quite a bit of extras. I have an extra top plate here. I also have 2 extra bottom plates if I need them, different style bottom plates, and we have 3 of these side plates. If you don't want to do a back plate, you don't have to. And then I also have one of these extra large plates on here too, and 2 extra arms, which is pretty cool because a lot of the other kits that I've built this year don't come along with extra parts. I've actually had to order, sometimes when parts weren't available, I had to order a whole extra kit just to get an arm. So this kit's different. You actually get some extras along with it, and that's super cool. I don't see any extras of these. These are the support arms that go along the front of the quad and around the sides. There's 4 of those total, so it would be cool if we got an extra one of those, because I feel like a forward crash might actually crack one of those, but we'll have to see during our review. And a review will come up after this build video. Hopefully some of this has helped you guys along the way. So now what I'm going to do, I think I'm going to trim my receiver wire here a little back, and I'm going to try to stack it on top of that flight controller, and then we'll mount the camera next. So I have my camera all wired up and everything's good to go here. It's mounted to the top plate, and I have the screws in on the sides. Don't forget to put your screws on the sides. Now I have my VTX ready to go here. It's going to mount to this back part. I'm going to use that piece that looks like this. Looks like an arm extension, and this side has a longer space on it, so you can move it in and out and give a little more space on that side if you need it. But I am using that Lumenier Raceband VTX that they have. It's at 200 milliwatt. It's fits perfectly on this frame. And I went ahead and put some zip ties around these outside plates, and I have this one sort of as a door open up right now so I can put my camera inside. And I ran out of black zip ties, which kind of sucks because I like the whole blacked out look on this that they have, this theme that they have going here. Now looking at the receiver, I have it stacked on top of the flight controller, and there is enough to get that X4R inside there. So pretty cool that I'm able to do that. Don't forget to bind your receiver if you're going to do it this way before you put the camera and the top on, because it's going to be really hard to get to this bind plug. Also, as a word of advice, if you're going to do this method, I would take it out of the paper wrap and I would shrink wrap around it. So put some heat shrink around it, and go ahead and set it in there with maybe a little tiny piece of VHB on both sides underneath here, just to kind of sticky it in place. So now I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to take the camera, I'm going to bring it up and over here, and it fits in, and I have plenty of camera tilt here. So I can still adjust this camera a little bit even though that receiver is right below there, and it just fits in there, as you can see here. So I don't like a lot of stuff hanging out, like a lot of wires hanging out, so could take a little piece of extra heat shrink and put over top of this just to kind of hide these wires in the front, as this might take some bit of impact, just to save those wires just in case. I also did the same thing on the bottom of my VTX back here, and this is going to be facing downward, but I took a little piece of heat shrink and put it around this because this is going to be on the exterior of the frame, and I don't want it to get hit directly, take a hit and sever these wires. And we're going to tuck some of these wires up inside here when this is mounted on. So now I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to take some Loctite and my longer screws, and I'm going to come in from the top and I'm going to start screwing these screws down here. Okay guys, I'm pretty much done with the total stack here, and I have my antennas on now. I got my VTX mounted on the back the way I wanted to do it, with a little bit of heat shrink covering up this bottom part here, and about halfway up the back I've got this channel changer here exposed, and I did run a zip tie around this, and there's a back plate behind it, so if you crash, when this pushes back, it has something to push up against. Hopefully it'll take less stress off this top point right here. I got my side plates on, and everything is looking pretty good on here. Got plenty of tilt with the camera, and I can adjust that a little bit if I want to. I think I'm going to leave it about right there though. Now I wanted to show you guys these outer parts, these bumpers, and the way they go. So the way I have them laid out right now, the way you're seeing it here, is looking at it from the top. Let's see if I can get it to focus here. There we go. Looking at it directly from the top, and so what this is going to do is going to give you 2 bolts on each motor, and you're going to use these little 10mm bolts. Make sure you Loctite them. Make sure you do that. That's very, very important, because they will vibrate out if you don't do that, and that'll go through both pieces of carbon fiber, this bottom bumper plate and up through the arm into the motor. And then after I'm done with that, I pretty much just have to choose what props I'm going to put on here, because I already have it set up in Betaflight and everything is already flashed in BL Heli. I set that up, and I set up motor direction, so I'm pretty much good to go after this. Bound up, set up with a Tyrannus, all the modes are set up in Betaflight, and it's ready to fly. So after this, we're going to go ahead and put the bottom arms on, the exterior arms, and we're going to finish it up. Alright guys, that was the last step. We had to just put those outer edges on, these outer braces, and we're good to go. So look at how awesome this thing looks. It looks super feather light just sitting on the bench. I can't wait to weigh this total configuration. The frame itself, by itself, weighs 45 grams, and I'm really wondering what they weigh with these nuts on top and the props, and then we'll also weigh it with a battery on there, like a 1300 Lumenier battery, 4S on the bottom with the strap. I'll give you a total weight before we end out the video. But I want to say thanks again to Lumenier for making such awesome frames and such awesome components to go on these race quads, because they really are top shelf. If you're looking around on the internet and you've seen different various frames around the world, these guys are definitely some of the best out there. They have some of the best motors, and some of the first ones I've seen with ceramic bearings for multi-rotors so far this year. So very cool new trend that you want to get those on your quad, because everybody loves these Skitzo motors. They really do rip. Now on the bottom here, it was pretty easy to do. Just make sure you pay attention on the direction, by the way, which way they face, and they should look like this at the end of each motor. It gives you a little bumper there at the end of each motor. So I'll have my battery riding in the dead center, and I'll bring my XT60 down like that. But I'll go ahead and put the props on now, and we'll do a little weigh-in before we end out the video. But I'm very pleased with the way this came out, so I can't wait to fly it and give you guys the full review. on this QAV ULX. Okay, I got the scale on and it's zeroed out and I have it set to grams. I put these super awesome props on here. I've got those Racecraft props on. I got the purple to match the motors, and it looks like we're at 256 grams. That's without the battery, and now I'm going to go ahead and slap the battery on there and we'll see what it weighs with the battery and the strap. But check out these motors with these props on here. These are super sweet. Is this not like the coolest looking quad you've ever seen? It's totally crazy. It's actually, it's really amazing. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab that Lumenier battery and stick on here and weigh it for you with the battery. Okay, so I got the battery on the bottom here. This is a 4S 1300, and I trimmed the end of it just a little bit so it would fit in between this ESC board and this bottom plate here, and I was able to get it all the way around pretty nicely, so it's good to go. Now we can go ahead and turn on the scale. We'll zero that out and we'll drop it on the scale, see what we got. Total weight 407 grams, 408 grams for this QAV ULX. Not bad. So it should really rip out there on this power system. I'm pretty stoked to try out these new props as well. I've been hearing a lot of good stuff about these, so everybody's flying them. I've been flying dowels for the last year, and these aren't quite as efficient. We figured out over the last year it's kind of going a new direction now toward not as much bullnose on a lot of the props, so they're starting to have a finer taper on the end because they're way more efficient, and they're actually a lot smoother in the air from what I see. Now the Lumenier also has a version 2 prop coming out that are going to be way more durable than the previous versions, so you want to look out for these. Definitely want to give these a try. They also have some different colors as well, some clear ones, so you're going to be able to pretty much get some candy paint on your quad. This is starting to look really cool. So I'll see you on the next review, you guys. Thanks for hanging out for this build. Hopefully I covered most of the topics during the build. I probably didn't get to everything, but you know, it is really difficult to do a long build video, and I'll try to make it a little shorter for you guys. But hopefully my video shared some tips that maybe some of the other videos didn't share. So thanks again for hanging out on the Drone Camps channel, and I'll see you on the next one, guys.
Hey guys, thanks again for watching that episode. Please do click subscribe so you can see all the newest drones coming out each week on the Drone Camps channel. We're going to show you tons of new stuff coming out in the drone industry. I'm Justin Davis from Drone Camps. Thanks again. I'll see you on the next one.